So, first of all, as a warm-up, I've pulled some questions from our Discord server, chorussys.tv/Discord, and I expected them to be hard-hitting. Immediately after the announcement, I reached out to the chat, and I was like, what do you want to know from Odyssey's Lunchboy? And here are 3 questions. You can answer any of them. Just kind of feel your way around. Beepo asks, tell him I want Juno Wave in the game.
Okay. We got to look into that. That's a good one. I like the suggestion.
Kuyachi asks, ask him how his day has been from me.
From Kuyachi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So today's been pretty good. Woke up early, drove for like 3 or 4 hours, and now I'm at my family's place in Los Angeles. So I get to spend a day with the family, which is nice.
And finally, in the hard-hitting questions category, Nokatoka asks, can you ask Lunchboy his favorite lunch and favorite boy?
All right, so favorite lunch would be like Japanese curry, spicy, with like tofu and okra in it. And then favorite boy is green tea. Easy.
First of all, there is another TJ around. Second of all, Timothy Chalamet is right there.
I don't know. I thought you were going to be more like, hey, if we're choosing one TJ here, how do we choose the other TJ?
Well, yes, but also I'm under no illusions. You've got Tom Holland, you've got Timothy Chalamet. There are a lot of good boys.
It comes down to what your definition of good is, right? You know?
So if Tom Holland shows up at your front doorstep tomorrow and says, right, mate, I really want to be in your new video game, you turn him down?
Yeah. Well, I guess are we saying like Tej is like, yo, I want to put myself in the video game. And then Tom Holland shows up and is like, hey, I want to put myself in your guys' game.
Right.
And we're like, well, we only have room for one. Or can we do both? I don't know.
In that hypothetical, Tom Holland maybe wins. Oh, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and Timothy Chalamet, he's already in Fortnite, so like, you know, he's been there, done that. Like we need some new blood, new energy in the games.
Right, that makes sense. God, Fortnite, just Dwayne The Rock Johnson versus Darth Vader, this nightmare.
Yeah, Rick Sanchez versus Timothy Chalamet versus The Rock versus Master Chief. Like, it's all there.
Here to celebrate the death of culture with me is Lunchboy. You are the co-founders of Odyssey Interactive. And recently, Odyssey Interactive announced that the game will go offline January 1st and stay offline as you reconfigure gameplay until the launch date in February, which was also kind of sneakily announced in the back half of that statement. In the blog post, you say this is a reaction to poor player retention. Essentially, people play for a few days, report they enjoy the game, but don't keep logging on. Can you talk a little bit more about that decision and kind of making that choice?
Yeah. So the most important thing for us, kind of in essence, is that like we want to create a really high quality of experience in the game, right? And there's a lot of things that go into the really high quality of experience. Some of that's the gameplay itself. Some of it is things like the like matchmaking times. So like, you know, your queue times, and then the quality of games when you matchmake. Basically, all of that like sums up into, did I enjoy my experience playing an Odyssey game or not? And one of the things that we think is most important for us, for Omega Strikers, for the studio, for the future, is that that quality of experience is high. If people are going to trust Odyssey as a developer, if they're going to want to invest their time into playing our games over all of the other things that they could be playing or watching or doing, that quality of experience needs to be at the core of it, right? And so there's really two things that we were looking at improving based on what we have learned from the beta. And the first one comes down to that retention question, which is great for us if everyone plays the game and loves it. And like that has kind of been the predominant feeling playing the game. Like our reviews on Steam are really positive. We see like from all of the content creators across tons of different games, everything from Smash, you know, to League of Legends, to Teamfight Tactics. that they say that this game is awesome, and we have so many like amazing clips that like gave so much energy and juice to the dev team of people, of those content creators being like, no, I'm not sponsored to play this game. Like, it's just really fun. Like, I know I don't play other games unless they're sponsored, but this one I'm playing because it's fun. But what we found is like, basically after the first couple weeks of playing, that feeling's not enough to get you to keep coming back to the game over and over again. And when we were talking to people about why that's the case, they gave us some like very kind of distinct like attributes of the game that they felt were lacking to make them want to come back time after time after time. So there's like one around variance, right? Just that like after you play for a while, the games can start to bleed together, blend in a way where they feel kind of samey, right? And I'll say, first off, this is true for like, let's call it the majority of the population. There's like a group of people that like are our most engaged players, right? Who play and think that that's not necessarily true, or that, you know, they see different things every game. But it's important that we be able to display that to, you know, a wide group, so we can have like a big, healthy player population, which I'll talk about in a second. So one is variance, right? And then the other one is kind of like appreciable skill depth. You probably saw in the post that we mentioned the term strike wars, which I think is probably the first time that we have, I guess, canonized that term. But, you know, a lot of the kind of like higher skill play in the game revolves around really good strike usage, which is cool. We want that to be part of the game, but we don't want that to necessarily be the thing that like a player who's just jumping into the game looks up to as that like skill kind of ceiling that they can reach. So, you know, like in Rocket League, you have those moments where the car flies up in the air and you get like really sick shots, your musties, right? Or you have the moments in like League of Legends with like the Faker Zed versus, or Faker's Zed versus Ryu's Zed, and, you know, the like look at the moves, look at the outplays, that kind of thing. And we want to try and create some more moments that have that kind of feeling, right? So that is appreciable skill depth that you can really aspire as a player to try and chase. And then the last one was just content, just that like in the current state of the game, there's not enough characters, there's not enough like skins, there's not enough like progression content in the battle pass or other systems like account levels or, you know, character mastery. And so all of those things just mean that after that like core fun, the like thing that I think is really great about Omega Strikers, that like moment to moment gameplay wears off. Players aren't like, hey, this game is bad, I don't want to play it. They're just like, oh, there's other things that I can do and I don't have a strong reason to come back to this today, so I'm not going to come back to it. And that's obviously not the place that we would want to be as a developer, right? Like we want to be building an experience that people want to play for months and months and months, for hundreds of hours. And so we need to kind of like give ourselves the time to be able to build that. And maintaining a live service at the same time as building new content is hard. It's not impossible. And it's something that we like, you know, aspire to do. But with the extent of the changes that we're kind of looking at, the extent of new content that we want to add to the game, it was hard for us to focus on both trying to address issues that were showing up in the live game and build those things for the future. And then that takes me to, I think, the most important point that led us to want to pause the game, which was we're starting to, we're not at this point yet, but we're starting to get to the point where if your player population at any given time goes beneath like a certain level, then we have to make concessions on either queue times or we have to make concessions on match quality. So, you know, you either get longer matches to find fair games, or you have shorter queue times to find games that are less fair. And ultimately to us, those are two of the most important things in the overall experience for the game. Like that's what so much of the quality of the gameplay experience revolves around, right? And if that is ever jeopardized or in a bad spot, we think that we're presenting a version of the game to players that isn't representative of a quality bar that we feel comfortable with. And so we don't want, you know, that to be the experience that people take away from Omega Strikers.
Because then, of course, they will have a worse experience with the game and not play for as long, and we enter what's known as a death spiral.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a lot in there. Let's kind of go through it point by point.
Sure.
First of all, I'm curious, like, this is a wild decision. I've played a lot of games, I've commentated a lot of games, so I've been, like, highly involved in a lot of online competitive games, and I have never been in that environment and seen a game kind of hit pause in quite this way. So can you, like, who makes that decision? What was the process?
Yeah, so for us, really, like, the way that we made the decision is that we had certain, like, thresholds that we had set on that, like, matchmaking end for like the quality of gameplay health, where we're like, are the match qualities still good, and are the queue times, you know, in a reasonable spot?
So it was always on the cards. It was always a plan, break this glass if we get below this number.
Yeah, like we were very deliberate in having, like, a point at which we were like, if it gets to that point, we will then, you know, basically trigger this plan where we say, hey, we are going to pause things because they're at this point and they don't look like, unless we do something major about it, they are going to get better. And that's, like, kind of one of the other points is we don't want to stretch ourselves too thin and invest a lot in marketing right now when we don't have the, you know, big kind of beats of, like, launching across platforms, of having a lot of new content in the game, of having updated the gameplay. Right now, like, it would honestly probably just be like spending bad money. And so we want to save that for a time at which we believe it will be spending good money.
So maybe that answers this question, but I'll ask it anyway, because people have been asking me to ask it, which is, obviously, there is a player base that loves this game, and maybe that number is going down in a worrying way, but there's a core and very active player base that is playing right now. Are you worried? Are you thinking about the damage it might do to that active community to put the game on pause for a month?
Yeah, that's what keeps us up at night, like, every day. I think that, like, we are, as a whole team, like, incredibly appreciative of the, like, level of just, like, dedication that group has been putting into the game. You know, we started, like, 2 years ago with maybe 40, like, college students playing the game, and we, like, gradually raised that over time. And now I would say, you know, we've got to the point where there's, like, tens of thousands of people who are, like, very dedicated, invested players in Omega Strikers, right? And we don't want to, like, end up in a spot where our strongest advocates, the people who are, like, most dedicated to the game, turn into, you know, have, like, a bad relationship with us because it seems like we've done something that ultimately is worse for them. And so, like, we are concerned about that. And it's why we're trying to do a few things alongside this that are meant specifically for that group. So for that group, we've heard a lot about, like, basically investments in kind of like a more open tournament structure. And before, you know, we get to the point where we, like, do the pause of the game in January, we want to be doing a number of, like, tournaments that are, you know, Odyssey funded and invested there, to basically give that group, like, an outlet for the competitive play. Because, to be honest, like, most of that group that is very dedicated and engaged is the more competitive side, which is what you would expect, right? But we need to give them, like, outlets for actually having meaningful competitive experience in the game. So that's a big one. And then I would say, like, alongside that, what we're hopeful of is that, like, I think that group are the first ones to really feel the pain of a game's player base declining. Because that group are the ones who we see screenshots from every single day of being like, here's my 15-minute queue. Or here's, like, you know, the game where I'm a challenger player or an Omega player and I've got gold players in my lobby, right? And again, those are the two things where it's like either your quality or your queue times. And so this, I don't, I don't know exactly how this will come across, but I'm just going to frame it as honestly as I can, and hopefully it's understandable. I think, like, in our opinion, or like in our kind of estimation, we think that it's better to put things on pause for that group, even though they are very dedicated, and basically say, hey, we're going to try and do right by you when the game is fully launched. And hopefully that addresses a lot of these issues that you're having in the experience, mostly because we just get to a point where we have a bigger player base. And we would rather do that than create a situation in which you're burning out, or you're having all these negative experiences, or something that you love turns into something that you're frustrated about, because we're just not able to give you the quality of experience at this point. And like that's always it's a really, really hard decision. Like I mentioned, it keeps us up at night all the time because we don't know if it's right. Like other studios do things in different ways. This was what we like believed would create the best experience for everyone at the end of the day, but we're going to have to learn from it. Like there's we're doing something new, kind of like we've done in a lot of different spaces. And I'm sure there will be things that we do correctly with it, and I'm sure there will be things that we do incorrectly and are painful with it. And so what I would ask, like, for the most dedicated of our players is, like, don't hold anything back. Just be honest with us about it. Like, if something seems dumb, if something seems like it's creating a more negative experience for you, like, talk with us about it. We're always looking at the channels where these discussions are happening in our Discord, in other Discords. And like, we are like excited to have conversations about them, because ultimately, like, the reason that we're here making Omega Strikers is because we want to put like a game out there that does things in a little bit of a different way and ultimately creates like more joy and satisfaction in the lives of, players all around the world. And when we feel like we're not meeting that, that's when we feel like we have to take like pretty dramatic action, which we are now. But the only way we can really know, if we're creating those things or not creating those things, is hearing from like our players themselves. So I would just say, don't ever feel, hesitant to lay things out to us as like brutally honestly as you want. Everyone really in that hardcore dedicated community.
I have worked in esports for 5 years. That is a very dangerous thing to say on camera. All right. Well, it was in League of Legends, so it's infinitely worse.
Yeah. I feel like our group right now, who's like playing the game a lot, it is a much more wholesome community vibe than the DMs that we used to get on the dev team. Like our Twitter DMs as League of Legends devs were a sight to behold. I will say, I would not expect anything nearly that negative to come from our current community.
I have gotten some death threats over my career. I have never gotten more death threats than when I was working on League of Legends. So there's like a line graph over time. There's a corollary there. That's not great.
Yep. That's League.
But before I worked on League of Legends, I worked on a game called Battlerite. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have 4,000 hours in Battlerite, TJ.
I have more.
Damn.
I was a Pearl one trick, so every single one of those hours is on Pearl, and I was the worst human on the server, and I was having a great time every moment of it. But that wasn't everyone's experience.
I played Ulrich and Paloma.
See, that's much better energy than what I was giving out. Pearl was a character designed basically just to silence people, just to ruin people's days. I know you know, but people at home might not know, because Battlerite wasn't a gigantic hit. It had kind of the same problems that you're experiencing right now, where people would play the game, they would spend a couple hours with it, a couple dozen hours with it, have a great time, and then never really pick it up again. And that's true for a lot of these, what I would define as perfect information, easy to pick up, infinite skill ceiling games. The other things that come to mind are Quake likes. Every single one that's tried to do the Quake thing kind of has these problems. Every RTS that has launched recently has had these problems. These are games that people will pick up, enjoy, and then not really keep playing. What do you think causes that drop-off more generally? Do you have any thoughts on what you want to do differently from that?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that cause that drop-off. And give me 1 second. I'm just make sure my phone doesn't die by like plugging in.
Sure. I also just asked you to explain what's happening to like 4 genres simultaneously, so...
Yeah. It's I mean, that's something that we've thought about a lot. Maybe this plug works? Yes. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna move my chair. All right. So, I think that that is a very like astute question, because like that is basically the heart of what we are trying to address right now, and like kind of solve for the long-term future of the game. So like our ambition and like our vision, right, with Omega Strikers is that it is something that's like a massive game that's played, by tens of millions of people. We think that it has that potential, and we think that that's why it's important for us to try and make it accessible to a wide group of people by like taking it across a variety of different platforms. But there is like a potential, right, that Omega Strikers ends up as a game with like a smaller core audience, kind of like your Battlerites or some of the RTS games that you were mentioning, because like the skill ceiling and like the depth in it doesn't feel super appreciable to players, and I think that that's like the like counter example to that is like a game like Rocket League, right, where it's got the skill depth, it's got the replayability. It doesn't have the like super big deep systems of a game like League of Legends, but like the core skill test is like exciting and engaging, and gets people to put a lot of time into the game. And so the games that we've seen that are kind of like the exception to the rule are the ones that have that like feeling of appreciable skill depth. They have the feeling of like variance and variety of outcomes throughout the game. And I think that that's really like what we are trying to target with Omega Strikers, right? Is that, well, like I feel like when you churn from one of those games, it's because you believe that like the next hour that I'm going to play that game, it's going to look basically the same as the last hour that I played it, and there's not really interesting things for me to like learn and do in the game anymore.
I really like that.
Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, I really like that definition from the player's point of view, because it lays out what you're trying to do in your post, where you say you want to make changes that increase the variety of gameplay. But you also, in your post, say Omega Strikers' core gameplay is fun, and you believe that, and you want to stick to it. So what defines that core gameplay to you? What are you willing to change? Yeah,
so we have like a few pillars of our core gameplay that we believe are like the most important things for the game. And we had 3, and they were basically there throughout the entirety of our development. The first one is that we want the game to feel intuitive. And I think that that's something that we get largely for free, in the fact that the game is got this kind of like competitive sports wrapper to it almost, right? Where anyone can understand like putting a ball into a goal. Like that's not too hard. And you see like characters smacking it back and forth, and really it makes sense, right? It's almost like crazy Pong in that respect for a spectator. And so I don't really think we need to do anything to change that. Like we're already doing pretty well, and I think even though we're going to other platforms and trying to broaden our audience, we don't need to like dumb down the game, right, to be able to accomplish that. So that one's not going to change. We also have this pillar of like the game feeling skillful. Like we want replayability in the game mostly to come from the feeling of like increasing and growing skill. And so I think some of the things that we are kind of like doing okay but not great on there are the feelings of like having meaningful outplays, the feelings of having like a narrative throughout the course of the game that like kind of like undulates almost in like pacing and intensity, and that we like the team play in the game is, I think, a little weaker than we wanted it to be. And so those are the main areas that we're looking to try and make that improvement in the skill depth kind of area. And so we're experimenting with a variety of different things on our end, but that one we want to adjust. And then we have a third pillar, which I will say also will remain probably pretty similar, which we call raucosity, or just like, you know, the idea that the game is like fast-paced, frenetic. Ultimately, to us, that's the thing that's like different about Omega Strikers from other games. Like, it makes it different than playing League of Legends. It makes it different than playing, you know, Super Smash Brothers or even Rocket League. Like, we have a unique feeling, and we want to retain that feeling. And so that means that we don't want to, you know, take the game and turn it into FIFA, or I don't know, you know, something like that, where like it's a lot slower, a lot more like deliberate in the actions. Like we still need a bit of that kind of like fast-paced intensity. We just need like the skill tests in it and some of the like systems that surround it to enable you to have that like more meaningful skill depth, and to enable you to have a feeling that when you come back, to use that same example before, the next hour that you play, you're wondering like, oh, what cool things am I going to see during that? Like, how is it going to be different than the previous hour that I played? But, you know, like the core gameplay of moving the core back and forward at high speeds, the core gameplay of having to balance like PvP of fighting other players at the same time as thinking about knocking the you know, core into the enemy goal, like those will remain the same. We're not trying to like, you know, go make a King of the Hill game, or I don't know, like turn it into true like, you know, stock Smash Brothers knockout type stuff, because we just think that that would lose what is unique and what is fun about the core gameplay right now.
All right. I don't want to waste your time, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I know you might not have answers to yet, and then we'll do a lightning round the rest of the questions we got from concerned players.
Sure.
So first of all, I want to talk about the things you are going to change. We talked about what you're not going to change, what you're not going to touch. I'm a huge nerd. I would say this game is all about positioning. That's the appreciable gameplay. That's what changes the game. Every single game is trying to figure out how to position and how the enemy team is going to position. Are you looking at bigger maps? Are you looking at ways to encourage or forefront that positioning model?
Yeah, sorry. So the point was specifically like making positions clearer, like, you know, forward, midfield, goalie. Or...
well, I think that's interesting because I've seen a couple of, like, there was a very viral YouTube video that I think it's called something like Omega Strikers, the hidden positions or something. And I don't entirely agree with its conclusions, but there's a couple of things happening. It's very obvious that like people coming from League of Legends are looking for a more defined role than they have right now. They're looking for more of a structure than they feel like there is right now. And secondarily, when I play anecdotally, my friends who are sometimes very good at video games, that is the layer they are struggling to engage with, is how do I get open for a pass? When should I, as the goalie, be utilizing positioning to shut down things? And they're not even engaging with it. It's not that they're getting it wrong, it's that they don't realize it's there in some cases. So is that something you're thinking about changing? What's the kind of thought process there?
Yeah, so we definitely, like, we agree that positioning is an incredibly important part of the game, and that it is an underappreciated part of the game right now. I think that there's like a few contributing factors to that. There is the kind of like there's just a really simple one around how big players are and how fast the core moves. That like a lot of players kind of just, I think it's harder to grasp how important positioning is until you see really good players do it, because it feels like things are moving at a speed and your character takes up so much size on the arena that like, oh, I can basically like you know, cover half the field or something as my character. And that's like, I think it's probably incorrect the higher skill level you go, because you see players like very deliberately playing positioning.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of...
Oh, I lost you for a bit there.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, my internet is not very good in this house. Let me try and move a little bit.
Got to compromise between accessible wall plug and good internet.
Yeah. There's a lot of assumptions that players make about positioning, and that it like kind of doesn't matter in the game, but it is one of the big skill tests in the game. So, and you see like the top level players use that positioning to their great advantage. Like you can see from everything from the collegiate tournament, and how like the Waterloo team, like I know they've played a ton together, so they've got like a really good kind of vibe going there. But it always just felt like the goalie was under so much pressure because the forwards had like nice splits and nice positioning, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's harder for people to appreciate when they get into the game. So yes, we are looking at things around making some of the positions like more clearly definable, and like some of the roles of the positions more clearly definable. But also I think the bigger one is trying to make positioning just feel more like viscerally important in the game. And there's always going to be a hard balance there, because, let's say we increase the size of the arena and like decrease size of players a little bit, so that it makes it like, covering a position well is more appreciable, because you can see the difference between someone who's like quite good and someone who's just new, right? In terms of how they can manage that, because now there's a larger like, skill ceiling in it. We just have to balance that with the feeling of like, people getting into the game and feeling like I never had the chance to, take the shot, or I never had the chance to, defend, because I don't have the capability to respond to the fast movement of the ball, or the core. And like, if I had positioned better, I would, but positioning is hard.
The youth soccer problem of the kids running around the field just following the ball and not actually predicting where it's going to go.
Yes, exactly. So I think that there is stuff, some stuff that we need to do with the actual core game, kind of like pacing and some of the, like, let's say relative sizes of different things, like, the arena and players and things like that, that can make those tests a little more appreciable. And then hopefully in combination, those two things make that skill test in the game easier for people to like appreciate.
Well, I'll ask you the question then. Would you ever think of a model for the game where the arena was bigger than the screen? Because that's, I think, a core element of the game right now, is that you can always see all of the action. Would you ever think of going more to kind of a MOBA-style POV?
So it's always something that's in the consideration set. I will say we have tried it a few times internally, and there are some challenges with it that we have not yet figured out the answer to. Like the primary challenge being the like, how do you handle the core being off screen? We've tried like off screen indicators, picture in picture type stuff. And it's very difficult to balance the like speed and intensity of the game with not having full information over like where enemy players are, or how the core is moving. And so it's not to say that that's impossible, just that we've spent some time trying to investigate it and not yet found like the best answer. So, in the future, that may be the case, that like it breaks the screen dimensions. But for right now, we're trying to play more in the set of like, I think some of our older testers will remember, like after the collegiate beta that we ran, we did some experiments with like map size and, going smaller, going bigger. And so there's still like a significant amount of space that we can play with, even without needing to go to things are off the screen.
Right.
So we'll probably start in that space and then, see where we can go from there.
Lightning round, we're running out of time, so we'll have to blaze through these. Resnock.
Oh, shoot. I'm taking too long with all these answers, TJ.
Sorry. Resnock, who made the excellent account scraper corestrike.gg, wants me to ask you about API plans. Do you have any plans that will break his site? Do you have any plans to build out more community functionality that would enable more sites like that?
Yes. So we do not plan to break Core Strike. We like
He'll
kind
be
of
there is.
our
I know one person who will be psyched to hear that.
yeah. Our internal philosophy with that is like we are a small team of developers, right? And we like honestly,
how many people are there at Odyssey right now?
in total we're around like 30 people
Wow.
across like all disciplines. So like engineering, every aspect of art, marketing, like product management. And so we're not like a small team of like 5 friends making a game anymore, but we're also not like a 500 person dev team like League of Legends or something like that. So we're pretty small. We like absolutely adore the community that we've got, and we love the like honestly there are like few things that are more inspiring than when like we see somebody create either fan art or like a site like Core Strike, or run tournaments for the game. That's just like pure fuel for us to like just want to get in and keep improving the game, make it better, invest a lot more. So fundamentally, we think that like the community will know better even than we will what kind of experiences, services, etc. The community needs. And so we want to try and get to the point where we can just provide basic tools, and then the community can go wild doing things like Core Strike, or potentially building infrastructures where communities can run tournaments, things like that.
Daftgrass, one of the most active players in various servers right now, asked me about rank decay. Do you have any plans to change how the LP system will work prior to launch? And then as a follow-on, what about rank reset? Will people who are playing during this alpha beta period get their ranks reset before launch?
So basically with that one, yes, we are considering some things, decay being one of them, because we think that like camping on the ladder and like then needing to create a bunch of smurfs, and the effect that has particularly on the high-end ecosystem is not great. And then yes, we would be looking at resets, but the resets would not be like most likely a hard reset. They would be soft resets, right? So similar to how like ranked seasons in League of Legends works, where it's not like if you were challenger, you're going to go get reset to the same level that like a bronze player was reset to. Like we will do some adjustments to your matchmaking rating, right, that make it so you are above what other players would be based on where you ended.
All right. And then I guess finally, is there anything that you want to say about the game's current state to a core player base, which is our audience, that hasn't been said?
I think I may have said this once or twice throughout, but like we like at the studio, I know it may have seemed like through the last month or so that we've been low on communication, particularly like relative to what we have been before. And I will say that like it's not that we aren't like looking and observing and like taking in the feedback. Like we're in a lot of these communities, a lot of these channels. It's that we are like trying to craft our strategy, trying to craft our response, and figure out like what we can actually do to make this a game that is worthy of like your continued investment and dedication. Like what we are honestly like the scenario we don't want to end up in is that we burn the like faith that you have in us, burn the like goodwill that you have, because we're not able to give you an experience that's up to the quality bar that like you deserve. And so we were silent as we were planning that out. We want to be like very communicative now that we've kind of said here's what we are intending to do, and like talk about things that feel bad about it with you guys, talk about things that seem like they're on the right track with you guys. Because like ultimately at the end of the day, this is why we all got into game development. Like we wanted to make games that felt like they were creating like more joy, fulfillment, connection between players. And we are like I think that we have really good foundations for that, and we just want to make sure that we create like the biggest possible impact and the like most kind of enjoyable experience for the game net for you guys that we can. And again, we're not always going to know all the right answers for that, so like definitely give us the feedback and don't ever feel the need to like sugarcoat it. We've been through a lot of games in the past, and like I mentioned, I think we've got a great community, and nothing that you say will be anywhere close to the kinds of things that we were told when we were on League. So ultimately, just really appreciate all the dedication that you've put in. It's let us discover. It's let us like figure out like more about the game, the studio, the player base that we want to be, or community that we want to be building in the long run. And so we hope that while it sucks for the game to go down for a month, that ultimately we can come back stronger and like prove to you that we're making something that is worthy of your time.
All right, and I did think of one last question once I put the notes away. I mentioned earlier that I played a character called Pearl in a game called Battlerite. Do you have any plans to add a counter mechanic to the game?
Oh, a counter? So we didn't really get into this, but the other part of like appreciable skill depth that we are looking at is like there's stuff around positioning, strategy, variance, right? But then there's also things around giving players like better options in those kind of little, almost like your 1v1 type scenarios where like right now there's not too much like, you could call it like rock, paper, scissors or something like that in the game. And so we don't have like the exact answers.
I'm hearing
right now,
yes. I'm hearing I'm gonna play Battlerite is what I'm hearing.
Not fully Battlerite, but right, like I think we do believe that players need more options in those scenarios. So people have thrown out tons of things to us in the past, like counters, like shields, like when you play soccer and you're like kicking the ball and you like stop it with your foot on top of it and you can like juke somebody out, right?
Yeah. Just to stop that.
Yeah, I'm not a big soccer aficionado, so I don't know the terminologies, but that kind of thing. Yes, like we don't have too many options like that in the game, and I think that leads to outplay moments and kind of like the feeling of having really like outplayed your opponent being lower, particularly in the goal scoring kind of space. Like I know this will be a really specific shout out, but Geek had like a really long thread in the Omega Strikers Discord channel, like the testers chat, talking about like goalie options and then forward options on scoring on goalie, and why to him like the games started feeling like they bled together is because like the attempts on goal felt like they were less interesting than they should be. And so when I say we're looking into like mechanics in that kind of space, it's to particularly try and make the PvP combat and the goal scoring feel like players have more options for skill expression and more options for outplay. And so we're testing like a lot of different mechanics to try and find the ones that feel like they add that and aren't just like clunky cruft kind of stuff that ultimately ends up feeling like a niche skill test that people don't really want to have to engage in.
All right. Well, I'll have to leave it there. But thank you very much for answering the questions. I put you through the ringer. I gave you the hard-hitting Discord questions. So thank you very much for being so open about it.
Cool. All right, TJ. Thank you so much.